finance minister has already come out with one small, some sort of a package. We are expecting more from the finance minister, and that'll be a gun on multiple packages, and the industry is expecting it more. So, from your perspective, we are eager to know what is your thought process and what will be your assessment on the post economy from India. There is always a talk that's going on. Today morning also, I read a news item that Germany is planning to file $6 billion damages against China. So how the China would be impacted, whether is it an opportunity for India from manufacturing side and take the point of time post-COVID to bring it to India and invest in India. These are all the challenges, but as you know that India has got a huge population. India's consumption itself is a bigger one. So considering the demand side of the India and the supply chain constraints, I would like to know. Over to you, Mary. Thank you so much, Mary, for agreeing to participate. It's a great pleasure for me to talk to you and discuss with you. Over to you, Mary.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope I'm audible. Shekhar, I'm audible. Am I audible?
You are audible. You are audible.
Okay, good. So, good afternoon, everybody. So, first thing is when Shekhar called me, I think in January to address, I could not because of paucity of time. Then again, he called me during budget. He called me to speak about the budget even before the budget was laid out in the parliament. So he virtually wanted me before the finance minister to address him on the budget. So I had to plead guilty and say it was not possible. So and then we were supposed to do it somewhere in the month of April, May. I request all of you if you can mute your mic, I'll be grateful because I see a lot of cross noise. I'm not able to speak. Yeah. Now.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah. So the first and foremost thing that we need to understand about COVID is it is too early to do any real-time analysis. Economically speaking.
Not audible. Yeah, but I think you need to come closer to the mic or something like that. Probably need to come closer to the laptop or mic.
Okay, am I audible now? Am I?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible? Yeah.
Yeah, very much, very much.
Okay. So now the issue that I would like to present about the whole of this point is that first thing, it is too early to make an assessment about the economic loss. If you had asked me about a lockdown of this nature on the 15th of March, that was probably a month ago, we would have all laughed. Now it looks like there is no flight till 31st of May. At this point in time, it looks like we are not going to have flights and trains running. Probably the local buses also may not run, the city buses may not run, which means technically there will be a lockdown till end of May. That's what I can see it at this point in time. Now let us do some calculations. I'm not going to strain you much. It's not a very difficult one. India's GDP, as we all know, is around $3 trillion. Something around, we can put it as 200 lakh crores. Take and give all the fractions and other things, you still can end up with 200 lakh crores as your GDP. That is for a 52-week period. Now, if you add, say, let us assume that 52 weeks for 200 lakh crores, you have a weekly income of 4 lakh crores. And if you again distill it and say that the lockdown, you may be working at 25% of the GDP because power is being produced. There is still some production, still some sales that's going on. So you still come out with a figure of say 1 lakh crore of GDP actually being produced 3 lakh crores can be a figure we can say actually is not being produced, sold, distributed, whatever. I would put the loss for the first 3 weeks at around 9 lakh crores. The second week, 3 weeks, as around another 9 lakh crores. So roughly, if you do all your mathematical gymnastics, or if you pardon me, the economists revel in this type of statistics and end up with any type of calculation, you are going to have somewhere between 20 to 25 lakh crores as loss in output. Some of which may be recouped, some of which possibly you can still recoup, but some of which you cannot. So I still feel that at this year end, a 5 to 7% drop. If you look at 20 lakh crores, and even if you recoup 10 lakh crores, you are looking at 5% drop in your GDP. And add another 5% drop, because to come back to peak efficiency, it is going to take 6 to 8 months time. So by 2021 March, I am looking at a compression of 10%, which is a very, very conservative figure. I think I would be happy if we end up with just 10% compression. Now, 10% compression from 2021 March to come back to this particular level of 200 lakh crore GDP. That means we are going to end up with a GDP of 180 lakh crores in the this year, this financial, and to come back again to 200 lakh crores is going to take somewhere between 2 years at 5% growth. So to catch up with what we are in 2020, we will be at the same place in the year 2023. So we are going to do a lot of treadmill exercises where we will be running, we will be doing a lot of activity, but we will be at the same place economically speaking. This loss is humongous. I'm telling you, it is an unparalleled loss, something that is going to put many MSMEs, even large corporates, in tremendous stress. The two type of stress, one is obviously liquidity, one is obviously the solvency. One is going to affect your P&L, one is going to affect your balance sheet. And by virtually when things start working, barring the Tatas and the Ambanis, I see virtually everybody having some sort of a stress, and there is going to be an NPA problem of unparalleled level in this country. Barring the Tatas and Ambani, which is the Mukesh Ambani, I'm not talking about the Anil Ambani group, obvious reasons. I am only talking about the Mukesh Ambani group, and telling you very frankly, everybody is going to be under stress. Now, I think there are 20, 25 people or 30 people, I don't know how many people are listening to this, but there are some 20, 30 people listening to this. Now, all of us are NPA. There is no point in talking about NPA. If 6 of us are NPA and 24 of us are not, then NPA regulations make a sense. If all of us are NPA here, NPA doesn't make sense. That means it is the elephant in the room. So the first solution probably the government can look at to tackle this is to suspend the prudential norms till 2023. Suspend your NPA norms till 2023, because there is no point in measuring and saying that 98% of my borrowers are all NPA, which means banks will be NPA, which means your entire financial system is NPA, which means your entire economy is NPA, which means you are going to degrade yourself and ask the rating agencies to do it. You can ask the rating agencies to go and write for it. You can tell, yes, this is how we are going to tackle our problem. Our problem is primarily because of a debt-driven economy. We have around 100 lakh crores of debt with commercial banks, and we would like to. I'm seeing some echo. Can somebody talk? Somebody has not switched on the mic.
No, go ahead, Amari. Yeah. Go ahead, Amari. Now it's better.
Yeah. Now, the point I'm again stressing is there is no point in continuing with your prudential norms. If banks have NPA norms. The government has the FRBM Act. Now, the FRBM Act is a byproduct of your Article 292 and 293 of your Constitution. Now, this is supposed to be your limit to which you can borrow, and that was fixed at around 3% of the GDP with a plus or minus 5% target. Government has never bothered to respect these limits in good days. I see no reason why it should respect it for the next 3 years. The FRBM Act can be placed at a suspension for the next 3 years, and 2023 till 2023 there is no point in discussing whether the fiscal deficit is 3% or 4%. You better compress the FRBM Act to your Godrej Bureau and keep it there in digital form if possible, and take it back once things are normal. When the patient is in ICCU, you don't look at his BP and say he should have a 110/70 BP. You can't have it today. So suspend both the prudential norms for the next 3 years. Next, having said this, now how do you address the cash flow problem? My view is all of us who are doing business, or 98% of us who are doing business, are, as I said, likely to be NPAs, potential NPAs, or most likely NPAs. There is no point in showing the balance sheet of these firms to the bank and say, please lend, because banks are not going to give money under these circumstances. Banks don't have the risk appetite even the best of days. Today, the bank, we cannot have a bankable balance sheet at all. So given this paradigm, given this a very, very stressful situation, I would suggest that the government itself must turn into a funder. And how does it do it? The government must say, for the next 1 year, when things start moving, it is not from today. When things start moving, government can say, no questions asked. Only one question that will be required to be proved is whether you have a GST certificate or registration certificate, and whatever tax that you have to pay, that you collect and you have to pay, say for the month of April 2020, you can pay it in the month of April 2021 at 7.5% rate of interest. Now, why do I say this? 7.5% is the rate of interest which the government is the weighted average cost of interest of the government. Today, government debt is around 100 lakh crores. Interest cost is 7.5 lakh crores. So weighted average must be 7.5%. Now, whether it is X, Y, Z, no assessment, no forms, no evaluation, nothing by the banks. You just say, okay, whatever input tax you have collected and what is the output tax you have to pay, the differential will be funded by the government, and that will be the amount that you will have it in your bank account for 1 year at 7.5% rate of interest. Of course, all that you have to do is to necessarily file all the forms, keep the government informed about what is the amount. I'm not saying anything on the procedural side. Let the procedural side continue, but the cash flow side, let that the most important thing will be that the firms will be funded by the government without a scrutiny, without an evaluation, without meeting the imperial standards that the bank asks you. So everybody has got this money. Now, this will be equitable. This will be across the board. This will be across every type of industry, and the biggest beneficiary will be the MSME. If this is allowed for 1 year, and I'm not saying that this should be done free of cost, I'm saying let the government take 7.5%. Firms will be ready to pay 7.5%. Firms will be ready, people will be ready, companies will be ready, everybody will be ready. And those who don't want, they can definitely go and pay the GST as it stands. In which case, there is no interest. If I don't want to take, Okay, I can go and pay my probably chartered accountants, lawyers. They may not require this massive amount of cash flow. They may go and pay, and they can take the money and pay it off to the government. But there will be some firms who may require it, and let it be given as a scheme. If this is given, I think the biggest beneficiary will be the MSMEs, and this can be it can make the government the lender instead of banks. Innovative thinking. Probably government may come about with saying that I have this problem, I can't lend, I cannot do it. I think we may, if even at the cost of pulling Article 360, which is the constitutional scheme of things regarding financial emergency, we may pull it and make this particular change in our GST, and we can make the firms get funded. This is my point number one as far as your rehabilitation package is concerned. Having said this, this has to be backed with something on the. I personally believe that if the RBI governor coming up and telling that I will fund 50,000 crores through NABARD and SIDBI, I am not at all amused, because SIDBI and NABARD are primarily banks or refinancing institutions. They go about financing only the banks and other institutions. They are not direct lenders. So finally, the lending agency has to be either State Bank of India or Bank of Baroda or something like that, commercial banks. And those banks today are under no position, because tomorrow, if something goes wrong, and in 2025, no banker wants to be seen answering some CBI or enforcement directorate. Nobody is going to lend in these circumstances. Mandatorily shift it to GST. That is the only solution. And if you think this problem is going to be sorted out by 25 basis point reduction in reverse repo, I think it is amusing to say the least, because what we are suffering is a seventh stage of cancer. What we are seeing is a band-aid as a prescription. We cannot fight cancer with band-aids. Let us be very clear. The RBI's understanding in the whole thing. Of course, they have no other instrumentalities. Also, let us also give it to them that they don't have any greater instrumentalities. Repo and reverse repo are the two instrumentalities they have, and beyond this, they don't have much about it, because commercial banks have to lower interest. But there is a huge risk also. We must understand lowering interest, because there is a huge clamor that I see about interest rate reduction. A couple of days back, I was having a look at the RBI's data. One data that struck me very, strikingly was that the total deposits in commercial bank is around 135 lakh crores of rupees. Given our population of 135 crores, that means every individual has a lakh of rupees in the bank as deposit. That's on an average per capita basis. Now you can understand the type of money that is circulating in the bank as deposits. 135 lakh crores. And these are a predominant amount of them are your household savings, your social security. It is also people who have kept the money to fund themselves post retirement, and these are money kept by aged people who have kept it for their evening of their life. Any further reduction, in fact, I think would be counterproductive. So reduction of interest rate beyond a point in the Indian economy per se, more so in these days of extreme stress, is not advisable, because unlike the US, there is no place where you can have a social security, a structured, organized social security, universal social security. You can at best have targeted social security, and in a country of 135 crore people, it's very difficult to have any type of social security that we may imagine. So the long and short of it is, interest rate reduction beyond a point will be counterproductive. The banks cannot lend, government has to step in. Next one on the fiscal side. I think the government has to understand that COVID, once it actually comes to some sort of a control, probably God willing in the next few weeks, and I hope so much earlier, we should have a definitive program for fight back post-COVID economy, and for which you don't have to turn to M.R. Venkatesh, you don't have to turn to any other economist. It is Keynesian model only. It was followed in the US post-recession. It was followed in Britain post-war. It was followed by a host of countries where the risk-taking appetite in the private sector no longer exists. The government must not worry about spending on capital expenditure. Now, there are quite a few things that the government can actually do. Each one can have his own idea about what would be the type of capital expenditure the government has to do. But my view is that given the fact that huge amount of reverse migration has happened, and this time I don't think the people who have gone back to our villages, back from Bangalore to North Karnataka, back to the Hindi heartland from say Bombay and Delhi, back to Madurai and Trichy from Chennai, are all people who are going to rush back to Chennai's and the Chennai's and the Bombays and the Delhi's and the Bangalore so fast. The capital expenditure program probably could be something that is centered around the rural area, and for starters we could be, and it need not be that those programs have to be something that we always believe. This Manregas and the others which already exist. I'm not talking about opening a pit and closing a pit. I am talking about something more serious, probably something like an irrigation program. We need to think about whether we can improve our food production from say 285 million tons to say 400 million tons in the next 3 years, and have a huge backup plan for export of food grains and farm related products. But for that we require, it is easily doable. If 10 years back I had told that we would be touching 300 in the next probably 10 years, people would have laughed at me. But 300 to 400 is going to take 10 years. I think we can do it in the next 3 years if we can accelerate and concentrate on our rural development. Of course, rural development along with it brings with it the challenges of healthcare, school, and the other related social sector, which needs to be packaged, and it can be packaged, and this should be packaged. And if the government is ready to say that when the FRBM kicks in, I will see to that there will be a 3% spending of the GDP in rural sector on capital expenditure alone. I think we can do tremendously well. It is not short of ideas. Everybody can do it, and we can do a wonderful thing. Take also healthcare. Now, I'm giving just a philosophical view. One way out to look at it and say this is a healthcare nightmare. We can say that, look, we don't have a proper healthcare facility. We are a soft country insofar as healthcare is concerned. Lament, do nothing. The alternative would be use it as a challenge, like all great countries have done, and probably be the healthcare capital of the world. Now you are always going to have something like 135 crore population, of which around 20-22% are about 65 years old. So you are one country where you always have a demand for healthcare. The problem with healthcare in other countries is that because of the low population base, they always have to worry about having an economic viability. In this country, in terms of demand, we don't have any problem. There will always be patients. There will always be patients at any place. Probably this is a type of situation where we may have to think big, like 100 AIIMS like institute, 120 AIIMS like institute, where each one of the AIIMS takes care of something like 6 or hello. Okay, I think there is some crosstalk. Okay, now having said this, now let us come to the government finances. Now, President Truman was always very skeptical about economists, because whenever he used to come with a plan, the economists used to come out and say, on the other hand. So he said, I wanted a single-handed economists. There is nothing called a single-handed economist, because economists have to be in the real world. They have to take care of a multitude set of factors. What if the rain comes? What if the rain doesn't come? What if there is a flood? What if there is a drought? So they have to answer every single question. You can't pose as one set of facts and ask for an answer. Economists always look at various variables and answer it. Now, when it comes to government, the government's finances has to be singularly be worked out. By a broad 20% cut in the salaries of the government. Now I am told that the government is seriously working on this. A 20% wage cut in the government employees will automatically translate into 20% wage cut in the state government employees, PSUs, PSCs, then in various joint sectors, then also the private sector. Virtually everybody has to be prepared, because when the economy is going to compress by 10 to 15%, you can't have a salary of 2020. You have to think about your salary, what you drew in 2017 or 2018. You have to go back on your packages and see what was it in that year. Probably that will be the ideal package to take, because the economy itself is compressed and there is no other way we have to do it. This, I think, will give, if government of India compresses salaries and pensions by 20%, government can have something like 1 lakh crore in its kitty. 1 lakh crores in its kitty is huge. And state governments can have an equivalent amount, probably something more. I will give you, I don't know much about Karnataka, but I can give you with some assurance about numbers of Tamil Nadu government. Tamil Nadu government has somewhere around 2 lakh crores of revenue. 46% of that revenue goes to fund state government employees and pensions. I'm told Karnataka is almost of the same level, but 46% of the state revenue goes to fund salaries and pension. 18% goes to fund interest. 6% is your establishment cost. So 46 plus 18 plus 6, 70% is on 3 ticket items. And balance 30% is what you do about everything. The capital expenditure, the welfare program, the free program, the so-called SARI scheme, the so-called Veshti schemes, all this flow about the balance 30%. I'll flip the question and ask you, the total number of employees and the pensioner in Tamil Nadu is around 1.4 million, which is 2% of the state population. The 2% of state population taking away almost 1/2 of the revenues of the state is something that is criminal, if not stupid. It is absolutely criminal that you allocate 50% of your revenue only to 2% of the population. And this is what it has come to be. This skew in our salary structures from the public sector to the private sector, it's a good opportunity to correct. This is a macroeconomic imbalance. This macroeconomic imbalance has to be corrected, and hopefully this will be corrected this time. Now let me take at the government level. I was talking to you what would be the consequences. If the central government can come out with on salaries, the state government can come with the same figure. we have 2 lakh crores. Government can think about raising another 1 lakh by simply selling certain assets to either LIC or to bank, which are not ready to fund private sector. Today, banks are not ready to lend because their problem is they're risk averse. But instead, if government sells them particular pieces of marquee assets, I am sure LIC, I am sure SBI, I am sure public sector banks can pick up. So you have 3 lakh crores that can come into your kitty. I think 3 lakh crores is a good starting point to start financing your entire operations of funding for your GST, your various other programs. Run your fiscal deficit liberally. Don't worry about fiscal. It's not a time for being fiscally prudent. It is not a time to be fiscally fundamentalist. You can jolly well go about doing it. This is what every single country has done it. As late as 2008, the American TARP program was predominantly based on liquidity, injecting liquidity. They injected close to 1.3 trillion, if my memory serves me right, 1.3 trillion into the economy to bail themselves out of the 2008 financial crisis. We need not hesitate, because the world over, the entire world is going to see fiscal deficits going up. So let us not be worried about this. Fiscal deficit is not a kosher. It's a number at 3% or 2% makes no great impact for a country like India. We can be liberal about our fiscal deficits. Any of rating agencies are not going to be in order for the next 3 years. Rating agent, nobody is going to call you for doing any rating. So even if you are called, there is nothing that nobody is going to lend. So even if you are AAA plus, nobody is going to come and lend. So be happy about it. Let the rating agencies take a 3-year break. Let us do something what is prudent to us. So look at the triumvirate that we can do it. Start on rural spending. Start something on agriculture. Start something that will go to the rural side. Think something big about your healthcare, or something big that would also trigger employment. Because healthcare, agriculture, these are things that actually triggers enormous amount of employment. Now, what is happening is the population of UP, Bihar, and Bengal. It's not only one of the most populated and densely populated regions of the world. It's one of the most underemployed regions of the world. That is why you have people from Bihar coming into, say, a city like Bangalore or Chennai, and setting up the small barber shop or something like that. Now, they have gone back. When they have gone back, they are there without much of jobs. Unfortunately, not much of development has happened in the last 20-30 years in these areas. I think this is the time that the government can also look at the regional imbalance and probably set it right. Now, coming to the direct taxes, I'll close with the direct tax, what government can do as some sort of a fiscal relief. Again, to disappoint people, let me tell you that if people think that this is a problem that can be sorted through monetary policy correction, I'm one of those who's not ready to believe it. This requires serious fiscal policy intervention. And probably last year in the interim budget, we had Mr. Piyush Goyal coming and telling very clearly that they have the highest respect for the taxpayer. Now, I want that respect to be monetized. I want that respect to be translated into rupee anna paise. How can you do it? Take your last 5-year tax paid, average it out, and say you are entitled to a credit, of course at an interest rate. I don't want anything free. I would love to get it back at say 7.5%, the same rate at what I spoke about GST for reasons that I have calculated and told you. I don't want the government to give me anything free, but I want government to give me liquidity. I want it to be priced at the weighted average cost of the government. It is for the government. The government has to trust its citizens. The time for government to trust its citizens is now. The time for providing samman to to its citizens is now. There's no point in waxing eloquence and telling us that, look, you are a great set of people, you have paid your taxes, and thank you very much. No, I want the government to do one step more, credit it to my account and say that have it at 7.5% interest if you want to, and start telling the people that you can use it for A, B, C, D, whatever is a very prudent norm. Say you can go about and paying your healthcare expenses. If you want, you can pay your EMI. You want, you can pay your employees. You can use that money for a particular set of factors to pay your bank. You can use that money to say if you had some past employee dues, you can correct it. So there can be some sort of a predefined way in which this account can be operated at 7.5%. If this is done, I think again the MSMEs will feel so happy that having paid taxes for almost so many years, we have got the government on our side when we are actually facing a problem. Last and not the least, postpone the PF and the ESI payment for 1 year, defer it, and again collect it over a period of 3-4 years, beginning 2022, staggered over a period of time, so that the employer contribution as well as the employee contribution are not collected in these type of stressful times. There is no point in collecting PF and ESI now. Allow that to accumulate and let them pay. I am told that there are various funds that have been collected in the government. For example, the dividend, unpaid dividend accounts, which run into hundreds and thousands of crores. I am told there are hundreds and thousands of crores of money lying in unutilized PF, unutilized ESI. All these must be brought back for the benefit of those who actually have participated. For instance, ESI. Why doesn't the government give some sort of relief to the laborer class at this point in time out of the fund? If there is a class of people who are eligible, now whether somebody will come and call, make a call on this amount to 20 years later is still a debatable point. But I'm saying today, allow this money to be used for the laborers and see that labor welfare goes on. Now, how and whether that is a question of detailing, we can always do it. But what I'm saying is there is money here lying in your account, lying dormant for so many years. Use that money and use it for some specific purposes of that particular class of people. Don't mix it into the consolidated fund. Don't try to say that will go about to fund your Pradhan Mantri this yojana and that yojana. You better use it for a particular purpose. So if this broad strategy is involved, the idea must be quickly to ensure that the P&L of every firm is profitable. Idea must be to see the balance sheet of every firm is solvent. If these two things are understood, I think we can have a quick turnaround. We have been hit very badly. There is no point in saying that we are minus. We will be ending up in this figure of 1.7% this year, and next year we will see a remarkable turnaround. I'm sorry, 2021 we will see an actual negative rate of growth, probably for the first time in 30-40 years. In our generation, probably this will be the first time. I don't know about anything beyond 75, but after 75, this must be the first year where we have seen a definitive negative growth. But we need not be alarmed. Every time India has been faced with a crisis, she has risen, and she has risen remarkably. I am sure businesses will adapt. Probably no one would have thought that we would be doing this wonderful webinar. Say even 3 months back when Ramesh wanted it, I never agreed. I said we'll do it in Kochi, Bangalore. He was giving me various places and dates. But today we are all forced to sit down and do these type of webinars. Morning till evening, we are all in some sort of video conferences. The business models will change, the technologies will change, the manner in which our travels happen will change. Hospitality industry, the way it conducted itself will change. Airlines will change. Banks will change. So we will all have to adapt to several things. But the cutest thing that I could think about, if there is going to be a compression, there's going to be a compression in the economy, and there is going to be efficiency flowing in out of this compression. believe me or not, the rupee may appreciate. That possibility, don't rule it out at this point in time. With this, I will stop, and if there are any questions, I will take it, and then we can wind it off. Ramesh?
Mr. Shekhar, can we ask questions?
Yeah.
Yes, please, sir.
Okay, my name is A.V. Srinivasan here from BCIC here, Mayban Engineering. Thank you so much, sir. It was a very good informative talk. You had said that government should give a lot of lending, let the companies keep the money and things like that. But politically, is it a good thing? Because if you see the private sector lending, all big companies have resulted in NPAs, a lot of unresolved NPAs going on. At this point of time, if you leave the money with big companies, will they not have a big political backlash for the government which is in power right now?
Now, political backlash will start only when you misuse your authority. When it is across the board, where is the question? And of course, there is an NPA problem. And I know that there is an NPA problem. But believe me, after June, July, all of us are NPAs. It's not only you are NPA or I am NPA. All of us are going to be NPA. So, what I'm suggesting as a solution is across the board scheme that would put, if everything goes well, 1 lakh crores in the hands of the MSME sector month on month. That is a huge money that can happen, and that is enough to revive the economy in my view. 10% cut requires, in my view, probably 2 to 3 years of handholding by the government. If for 1 year, if they postpone GST across the board, it is not that Karnataka people will get and Tamil Nadu people won't. Then only the problem starts. But if all of us get, then I see no reason why all of us should be worried about it. In fact, I would urge and suggest that if your chamber can also plead with your finance minister, if your state and the central finance minister, I think this will be a workable proposition.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
This will only help the organized sector, but there will be a lot of political ramifications from the unorganized sector as well as from the staff who are going to be affected, in particular the government staff.
See, let me put it this way. There is no difference between organized and unorganized. In India, almost barring some 50-80 companies of the listed in the stock exchange, everything else participates to what is called as the Bhagidari system, and all of them would fall under the unorganized sector, though they are in a incorporated form and do it. What I insist is that most of them today, you are covered thanks to GST, is that virtually everybody has been registered under GST, and what you are giving is that they're due to the government as a credit. You are not stopping anything else. You are giving them a credit that arises out of what they have to pay you. Now, still further down, there are people in the farm sector for whom you are giving 6,000 rupees every year, and 14 crore farmers are entitled to 6,000 rupees, for which a budget outlay of around 80,000 crores has been made. And still further down, there are people who are in your Manrega bracket, the daily wage earners, for whom a budget of around 60,000 crores has been made. For people slightly better off who have the ability to take care of themselves, I have proposed deferment in the GST for 1 year, and next April onwards you pay. I hope that this scheme will have somebody will give a patient hearing to this scheme and listen to this. And if this is done, I think your entire MSME, which covers 99% of your so-called unorganized sector, the small trader, the small shop owner here, or small manufacturer there, everybody would be covered. That's all is my point.
Government's revenue will also come to a complete stop if GST is not there.
Any other questions to MRV, please?
The government will not come to a stop. That is why I'm saying government will have all these things collected next year. Government will not come to a stop because there is. That's why I said government money can always, it can borrow money from the banks. It can have its own fiscal deficit. Next year when you pay, it can pay back the banks. It can happen that way, that government can borrow something more. And if you want the technicalities, I can explain to you that it can increase the SLR from, I think today the SLR statutory liquidity ratio is 24%. It can be increased to 28% and make the bank invest in your bonds. That means you will get money. And once you get money, you can always use it during various places. See, there is money in the economy. The problem is there is no confidence to spend, there is no confidence to buy. That intermediation has to be done by the government itself. Financial intermediation was done by the banks. Even banks cannot do it, only government can do it.
Sir, I have one question. In your this Srinivasan again, in your speech you said that the labor gone back to their Hindi heartland and other places. They will not come back. Yes, partially it may be true, but if they don't come back, and the enterprises in the big cities and the capitals and the factories, what do they do for the labor? What do you think it's going to happen? What's your thinking on that?
Sir, I don't do any crystal ball gazing. I am an economist. I would prefer to always take a negative view, work it out. If people don't come, I will tell you, they may not come for two reasons. Just let me share with you. Now, if this program were to be held in, say, Bangalore, I had to fly, I had to come there, you all have to come to a place, cars, Ola, Uber, so many things. We are doing this on a seminar. Believe me, this is going to be the future. All of us are going to upgrade ourselves into a much better technology, Wi-Fi connections and internet connections. And we are going to organize our seminars and exchange our thoughts only through these type of mechanisms. So 40-50 people coming to a place, 100 people coming to a place, Ola drivers, Uber drivers are not necessary. First thing, understand, the business places are also, the way you conduct your business is going to change. It's not going to be business as usual. What you had in January 2020 is not going to be what you will be having in January 2021, period. So whether all of them are required back in the city is a big question. Now, whether they will stay back, all of them will stay back in the villages, big question. I don't want to answer that yes or no. But all I can say is a good portion of them may stay back. And if they are not going to come back, and also understand, economics is not diverse from politics. UP, Bihar and Bengal have elections very shortly. And all the three places, politics being politics, they will definitely try to do something. So you have to ensure that it is directed at a vast chunk of our population, which is there, and it has to be now looking at viable employment opportunity back in these three states. That is the point I'm making.
Anybody has got any other questions to MRV? MRV, your point on the GST deferral, we have already taken it to the government, both central government and the state government. We have also suggested to allow the securitization of our refunds and give the banks to allow the banks to extend the working capital. That also we suggested. I'm not so sure how much the government is going to do, because there are a lot of refunds are pending. I don't think the government will be in a position to issue any refunds. So we have requested the government to allow securitization of refunds. It allows us to issue the working government banks to issue working capital. And third one is that where we are making a representation is that indigenization of imports. Because if you look at the total imports, India imports very significant, almost 35% of imports from China and USA. To the extent if you allow the Indian companies to indigenize the imports and then give some sort of a drawback facility or anything, that would also give. We have made a representations. How much is going to come is a matter of guess. But one thing I want to ask you, MRE, do you think that when the global is going against China and there are a lot of restrictions, people are want to, what will be the position of China in the post-COVID? How do you think the global will work with China? And what will be the position of India vis-a-vis China in the post-COVID situation, MRE?
See, I have always believed what the Chinese believe, that there is no global order.
Okay.
There is only civilizational states. With due respect to Samuel Huntington, who believed that there will be a global order, I believe that there will be a civilizational state order, which means that there will be Russia, there will be China, there will be India, there will be America, and there will be a host of other countries. Now, how they will play with each other depends on their civilizational aspirations. So, for instance, if you read, I just give you 1 minute, I'll just tell you. Henry Kissinger writes a book and says China has never invaded any country or occupied even a single inch. That is his view. Now, civilizationally, China is not aggressive. But this time, the way it has played in COVID, it looks like it has been a very aggressive player. Now, how the world will perceive it and how it will react, it's not only say Narendra Modi or government of India reacting, it's how the whole world, like for instance, I believe West Germany has sent a check for $130 billion or something like that to very funny. I don't know how it can implement it, but be that as it may, it shows the aggression of the world towards China, the anger. It also shows Japan is very unhappy with them. They have asked their businesses to relocate. So all these things, how it will pan out, it's too early to say, but it will eventually have, somebody will take some position and all of us will either fall in line or nuance that position.
Okay. Thanks, MRE.
Good evening, Speaker sir. I have a question over here. So thanks for the opportunity. Due to this pandemic lockdown, many MSME companies, companies who are into sales and service providers, are not able to get any sales or income, neither sales or not income, and even their supply chain is completely stopped. Okay, you understand, right? So how are the governments are going to support these companies after this pandemic situation? So I'd like to know from you.
The only solution for these type of companies is the lockdown should be lifted. Now, government can give you monetary, government can give you fiscal, but anything further, I think, as I said, government by itself cannot do anything further. And let us hope that these solutions get play out itself for a period of time once the lockdown is lifted. That's the only solution.
Okay. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you.
Anybody has got any questions? Yeah, MRE.
Yeah, I think we are done.
Yeah, I'll just ask anybody has got any questions before we can say thanks to MRE. Kaya Girish was there. Kaya ji, have any questions, Kaya ji?
Hello. Mr. Venkatesh, I am Girish here from Bangalore International Airport.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, tell me, sir.
See, the kind of
Yeah, do you have any question?
yeah, I do have a question. Typically, how long do you think this rippling effect of
Hello?
COVID to the aviation sector as such? Because
Okay.
we are in a terrible situation right now. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah. See, the ecosystem is fully affected. Most of the airports are typically in a PPP model one, which is the bigger ones. They are on an expansion phase, and on top of it, airlines were bleeding. That's how they generally put it across. Even if it is because of their mismanagement of funds, they're always in a trouble situation. And ATF is not under GST. And how will the pickup of a airline start once they start their business? Can we see any type of a money in the form of user development fees or the fuel and F&B retail, all those things happening there, and the fuel farms and the cargo terminals? They have to pick up. They are the ones who are going to give us revenue. In the midst of all these things, we have tremendous interest costs already and the expansion related expenses. So typically, what kind of a time, how much time it may take us to come back to the situation pre-COVID levels?
Okay. As I said, pre-COVID levels, if everything goes well, things will return to normal. I did a calculation and showed to you that it will take another 3 years.
3 years.
3 years. Now, if things go well, okay.
Yeah.
For aviation, hospitality, all these sectors which were very badly affected, which are very badly affected, I think it is going to take much longer.
Correct, sir. But bounce back of this confidence of passengers, do you think that it may come back maybe in 6 months' time to start coming into the way they start flying?
At this point, I don't have confidence in traveling in aircraft. Okay, that is why I'm sitting in Delhi, Chennai, when my office is in Delhi. Now, when I will get a confidence, it's a very difficult thing to answer at this point in time.
No, domestic. I'm only asking the domestic travel part. Any travel for that matter.
I'm saying even to fly to Bangalore. I'm saying even to fly to Bangalore from Chennai, I'm not having the necessary courage at this point in time.
Correct. Thank you, sir.
It will be very long. It's a long drawn drive for you.
Thank you, sir.
And thanks, MRV. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks a lot, MRV, for your participation today. We look forward to your more participation. Once the COVID situation improves, where physical meetings are possible, definitely I'll be inviting you for the way ahead post-COVID, MRV. Thank you so much on behalf of BCAC. I thank you, MRV, and I thank all the members who participated here. Thank you, MRV. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, MRV. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye.